So, greetings to everyone as we look tonight at the assessment two, which asks you to develop a lesson plan sequence of 1,000 words or so, and you can also have material in the appendix, and students have shown good use of this in previous assignments. That is, the 1,000 words presents quality material that you're working on, and then for your lesson plans that you put in your lessons, often you don't have enough room for that. Often you want to develop good material for your lessons for the future, and you can put them in an appendix. So my suggestion is in the appendix, you can have the 5 lessons that you're working on, and then in the lesson plan itself, you can have a summary of these lessons, and you can also have a quite extensive engagement with the justification, that is why you're doing what you're doing. And also you can have the consideration of what scholars and theories say about the ideas that you're engaging with. So I'm suggesting 5 lessons in the appendix, but also in the lesson plan sequence. So in the lesson plan sequence of 2,000 words, you're going to have around 1,000 words in the lessons, which is going to only allow 200 words per lesson. And for longer discussion of the lessons, you can have that in an appendix if that is helpful for you. That could help to develop resources for the future. And then you're going to have a discussion of the justification for 1,000 words. And the important thing there is to think through why you're teaching what you're teaching, how you're teaching what you're teaching, and also what are the theories, models, and approaches that you are engaging with. That is, theories, models, and approaches in the design of these lessons that you're working on. So look for the best theories and ideas that you celebrate and like in terms of designing lessons that work, and also ensuring success for your students and ensuring valuable implementation, and also assessment of how students are progressing during the class and afterwards. And so in the appendix, you can put a scope and a sequence, you can put lesson plans, you can put a concept map, you can put some diagrams, you can put activities that you might have in the appendix, you can put details of assessment that you might include. You don't need to put a lot of time in here, you don't need to put a lot of editing time into the appendix. This is a resource that you can use in the classroom. So in the question, sometimes asking you to work with biophysical interactions, that is, how does the physical world of the atmosphere, the water, the mountains interact with the biological world of plants, animals, and humans? In the 2022 curriculum, this is described as the Earth's natural system. So please go to the New South Wales curriculum, Year 11, Earth's Natural Systems, in which we could be looking at people, economy, lots of other geographic areas that we could be looking at, cities and rural areas. We're going to concentrate on 4 basic areas. Firstly, the atmosphere. And so the atmosphere is not just the oxygen and the air that we breathe, and in some places this could be polluted or contaminated. In Tasmania, in Queenstown, where there was mining, all the plants died because it was polluted. And in some parts of the world, pollution can be a challenge to the atmosphere. And then some people like to live in certain parts of the world because it has less polluted atmosphere, it's healthier atmosphere. So the first thing we need is atmosphere that's going to give us the oxygen and the air that we breathe. Second, we need water. And so with regular rainfall, the plants grow, and then we can have our agriculture, and we can do well. And then the mountains and the shape of the land and the soil that we have is often going to govern how well things go. And then in the ecological system, we're going to have the plants that grow. So there is the natural plant world, and then there is the man-made plant world of the agricultural plants that we grow, such as the cereals and other plants that we grow. And then there are the animals, and then there is the natural animal world. I've just come back from India, where they've got natural wild elephants, which we were able to drive through forests and see the wild elephants. And then these can be also tamed. And so we have the tamed animals, such as the cows there. And this raises questions in that if we tame the cows and raise them, are we getting rid of all the natural vegetation in order to raise our favourite meat? And then, of course, there are humans, and then human population has risen from billion people to 2, 3, 4 billion people over the last 200 years. And so human population's now putting pressure on the environment. And so we have to consider that in geography as well. So basically, we're looking at 4 systems: the atmosphere, and then we're looking at the water, and then we're looking at the land systems, which can include the land systems that are important, such as mountains, rivers, and then we're looking at the ecological systems there. So this is the series that you're going to develop. Now, if we're going to put this in time order, briefly, I think we as scholars and teachers and geographers need to consider the long history of the world. So often we think about the world of the last 2,000 years, since the time of the New Testament, since the time of the Romans and the Greeks and the Hebrews, through to now. But the earth in which we live is longer than that. And we could go back to the time of Moses and Joshua. And if we were to do that, that takes us back another 1,500 years. So we're up to 3,500 years. But we're not really going back as far as we could then. If you were to go to Israel, and if you were to go to Jericho, where Joshua walked around the walls, you would see there in the middle of the ruins that there is a tower in the old walls of Jericho. That you can still see the tower today, and archaeologists go and explore this tower that was stored with grain, and they can see where the grain was stored. What's fascinating is that the grain that was stored in this tower was stored there 10,000 years ago. So this is the beginning of civilization 10,000 years ago. And so when we're talking about the need for water and to grow grain and farming, 10,000 years ago is when we have the beginning of more serious agriculture at places like Jericho in Israel, and you can still do your studies of that today. But of course, the Australian Aboriginal people were collecting plants and animals perhaps 40 or 60,000 years ago. And so if you are going to include the Australian Indigenous people, then you're going to have to go back even further still to consider them. And so I think a rich Australian understanding of our natural ecosystems and our history would include that period of time. And then if we were to go back even further in time, and as Christians, we're interested in the first humans, and we're interested in Genesis chapter 1, 2, 3, etc., we're probably going back 100,000 years or more. And so we've got the origins of the first humans. But if you really want to know about the atmosphere, one of the great miracles of the world, called the anthropic principle, is that this world in which we live is a world which is made for plants and animals, which is beautifully made. And if we go back hundreds of thousands of years or even millions of years, we see that the world is wonderfully made for us to live on. And so the word anthropic principle is the idea that the universe's physical laws and the constants that govern the way the universe is governed is just right for intelligent life, is just right for everything that lives here. One of the big challenges with the anthropic principle is that if we want oxygen on the Earth, and if we want water on the Earth, oxygen and water don't naturally exist when the Earth comes into being. And so to get the origins of oxygen and water on the Earth, we have to go way back in time, 2.5 billion years, in which further out in the solar system, the oxygen and water from comets and asteroids came in and gave us just the right conditions that we needed for life on Earth. So, in getting the story of the atmosphere, we have to realize that there is a huge story that precedes it. We haven't got time to include a lot of that, but I think we have to be aware of it because it's part of the history. And as Christians, it's part of the miraculous world that God provides for us. And if we're to know truth about what is unfolding, then we need to be aware of this larger source of information. So the atmosphere, with the air and the oxygen, connected to the hydrosphere with the water, connected to the lithosphere, that is the soil and all the nutrients that we have, connected to the plants and animals, and the biosphere in which the plants are photosynthesizing and producing. All this is part of a very, very complex world that is ideally suited and to life, including life for us. And so this is a miracle that we have these four systems working together: the atmosphere with the gases, the hydrosphere with the water, the lithosphere with all of the soil and the nutrients in the soil, and everything working in wonderful cycles, and then the plants taking the sunlight and taking the carbon dioxide and producing everything that's needed for life. So we're going to look at the ways in which students can understand the interconnection between all of these. We're going to ask you in this unit to study these systems and think, how could students gather information about these four systems and present them? One good approach would be a student-centered approach, whereby we might give a period of time. If you've got 2 hours, you might give 20 minutes or so, which is teacher-directed, and then you might work with group work and research work where the students gather the material so that in year 11 they're able to develop their skills of conducting research and gathering the information that is needed. And then we think about how to put all of this together in the assignment that they are preparing. So you're asked to use lesson plan templates, such as you have already, and you can choose to either use those that you're using in the school or those that you're using with the college, such as Alpha Crucis. You're asked to consider the general capabilities and the cross-curriculum priorities as you develop a teaching and learning sequence. And then you're able to develop age-appropriate strategies that could include language, literacy, numeracy, numeracy, and also you're able to consider some of the different backgrounds and different abilities of the students. And then in the second half of the assignment, you write a justification for the way you have approached this study, and the focus is on these biophysical interactions that you are working with there in this assignment. So remember that out of our atmosphere, if you do a scientific study of it, 80% of it's nitrogen, which some plants can turn into fertilizer. So that's a very important um, uh, part of plants' life. So nitrogen is important, and only 20% of the atmosphere is the oxygen that we need for life. And some of you may have seen on the corners of shopping centres, you can go in and you can get 100% oxygen. And so 100% oxygen, you could breathe that. That could really make you feel good. And so 100% oxygen can be available at a cost. And and you could research where to buy this or where to get this provided, and you'll find that all around us you can get this 100% oxygen, and there are a number of places all around us where they will provide boost oxygen. And so boost oxygen for $35, you can get 100% boost oxygen there. And some people say it makes you feel good if you have that, but be careful. You'd need to check out the benefits and limitations of this. So just our normal oxygen in the atmosphere is 20%. And then carbon dioxide is less than 1%. Carbon dioxide is 0.04%. However, over the last hundreds of thousands of years, the CO2 in the atmosphere has been stored in the tree timber, and when the tree timber falls in the ground, it can be changed to coal and oil over hundreds of thousands of years. And this is a beautiful resource that people could slowly use, and it could keep them warm. And people have done that back in ancient Rome. They would burn coal, would keep them warm. They would burn oil, and that would make for oil lamps back in ancient Rome. And they would get oil out of plants that produce oil, and fish and such forth that produce oil. So it's a good resource. However, even though it took hundreds of thousands of years to store the world's supply of coal and oil, in the last 200 years or 100 years, we've invented the train engine that burns coal, and we've invented the petrol engine that burns oil or petrol. And in 100 years, we've burnt a lot of what took 100,000 years to make, and longer, hundreds of thousands of years. And that's driven up the temperature of the Earth's atmosphere. At one stage, it was believed it might be driving it up by about 0.8 degrees. Now it could be 1.5 degrees. And one of the problems is that the plants can't move. And so they're now in the wrong spot for the temperature that they're living in. And I was talking to some professors the other day at one of the universities, and they're expecting that a third of our plants could die out and that animals could die out, etc., over the next little while, next tens of years, 100 years or so, because of this temperature global warming problem. Now, for Christians and people in our societies, if we mention the word climate change, people are often likely to say, here we go again. And there's many different views on climate change, but many people have not done a lot of research on this. And this raises the question, what is good research and what is good critical thinking? And so we are preparing and training students. And so good critical thinking is open to a diversity of opinions, but it also looks to the weight of evidence. Now, the Natural Church Life Survey has looked at what Christians believe on climate change, and every 5 years we have a census. And at the same time, all the churches around Australia take a census of their views in churches. What they find is that the number of scientists who believe in climate change, and so the percentage of scientists who've studied the atmosphere and studied the plants and who believe in climate change is around 92 to 98%. There are some who don't feel that it's happening, but around 92 to 98%, maybe 97 to 99% of peer-reviewed scientific literature found that around 97 to 99% agree that humans have caused the climate change problem that we have. And in the Bible, we have examples where God warns about the need to carefully care for your environment. And in the classic case of Genesis 1 to 11, the people of Noah's time were warned to be caring for one another, listening to God, loving one another. They didn't. And God said, this is going to make things catastrophic, and there can come the wiping out of whole situations. The prophets Jeremiah and others in the Old Testament said, Israel, if you are not doing the right thing, caring and resting the land every 7 years and resting every 7 days and caring for the land that you live in, and Deuteronomy and Leviticus and others describe the way we need to care for the land, because it's the land that gives us life and it shows our honouring God and taking accountability and responsibility, then disaster will come and can come. And in 722 BC, because of this judgment that came, the nation, 12 tribes of Israel, 10 or 11 were wiped out by the Assyrians, and disaster comes when people don't take care and responsibility, don't care for their world around them. And in a book called Collapse by Jared Diamond, he wrote about a number, 20 societies that he looked at, and he describes 20 societies that collapse because the societies did not care for the land around them. And so we see that there are a number of societies where the trees are cut down, erosion, salinisation, water management, overhunting, overfishing, overpopulation. All of these problems, including climate change, bring disaster upon the world. And so this is not the first time in history that disaster has come upon the world and difficulties have arisen. And so if you go to Google Scholar, you could easily find scholarly resources, and you could put a search into Google Scholar, and you could use these in the assignment that you are preparing here. So I encourage you to give thought to the ways in which you can develop a deeper understanding of the need to care for the environment. And I think this is one of the concerns we have, is the concern to care for the atmosphere and water geographically. And so we could find resources that talk about Christian influence on caring for the environment. And so you click on CITE, C-I-T-E, you've got a copy of the resource you can put into your reference list. You open up the resource, you can read that, take notes, write in your own words, and you can engage with this material. So think some big questions, big thoughts about how you would stimulate the students to think about caring for their environment. Obviously, you've got to work with different viewpoints and opinions, and there can be some students who can say that there is no such thing as human induced climate change. I think if those situations, we need to encourage respect, listening. We need to encourage openness to a diversity of viewpoints, and we should not shut one another down. We need to show love in all things, respect in all things, and careful listening to all viewpoints. So, climate change, here we go again. That's because it's an important subject and we need good research skills. And so, we're not pushing one viewpoint or another. We're pushing what is good research and how do we carry out good research skills in order to better understand what is happening. And one of the things that we're seeking to understand is the views of Christians. So if 97, 98, 99% of people who are scientists say that climate change is occurring, when we interview Christians, we discover that only 44, 56, 56% are saying that climate change is caused by humans. And it's possible, sociologists say, that Christians live in a Christian bubble where they sing their own songs, they speak their own language, and they're not open to some of the scientific insights, where there are godly Christians in science who are explaining some of the things that are happening. And so there is another discussion that can take place there. So the National Church Life Survey research in Australia, which is conducted by all the churches from all the denominations, outlines some of these understandings of the way churches feel about climate change. And so you can use that as one of the resources in your essay and as a discussion point, not to convince and change people, but to make people aware of the information. We have to recognise that the internet is like a rabbit hole, and whichever rabbit track you're on, if you're on a science rabbit track, which is where scientists spend all of their days and where they get paid, then they are looking at particular evidence-based material. But if you travel down another rabbit track, conspiracy theory rabbit track or wherever, then you'll get different results depending on which information bubble on the internet people are a part of. And this raises a further discussion about different sources and reliability and critical thinking and information. I think it's important to be open to a diversity of views, but also be aware of evidence-based views and also be aware of science-based views. And science is based on observation and measurement. And if you go to a hospital with a problem, you're not after opinions, you're after evidence-based views that have been tested. So science is about testing, and we can introduce that discussion as well there. And so this assignment, because it's looking at the global atmosphere, is going to clearly introduce areas relating to climate change. And so it's worth thinking about how you will introduce that, work through that. Do go to the New South Wales geography guidelines and materials that you'll find on the website. And so we go to New South Wales Year 11 12 geography, and we're looking in this case at year 11 to keep it fairly simple. We're looking at the 2022 curriculum to keep it simple, and we are looking at the second topic. And so certainly you could look at the first topic, which is on methods. So certainly inquiry skills. I encourage you to look through those inquiry skills and the tools, look through the tools as well. But we're focusing on the natural systems, the atmosphere, the water, the geomorphic systems of mountains and rivers, and then the ecological systems. And as Christians, what is wonderfully of value to us is that God has given us these wonderful atmospheric systems that enable us to live. And in the Gospels, Jesus refers to water and refers to the air around us and refers to God's provision for us. And so the atmosphere and the hydrological systems are a gift from God, as are the mountains and the rivers, and then the plants too, which Jesus also describes in the Gospels as a gift from God. So that's what we're focusing on here before going on to people and humans and other geographic ways of studying the world in which we live. And then you have the full description of the essay and what work you have to do on that essay in the Moodle website. So if you go to the Moodle website, then you'll find all the details there. Of what we are covering in this lesson. So if you have any questions, please get in touch with me, and also if you have any other questions, please get in touch. Remember, the half of your assignment is on the justification. So that's not just something else that you do as an aside to the 5 lessons. The justification is a very important to think through what you're doing, why you're doing it, and what will be covered. And so the justification is going to be very, very important part of what you do. Remember too, we have considerable amount of material that you should be working through each week online, and so please read through that material where we introduce various aspects of geography each week, where you'll find full details of each of the assessment items, including this lesson plan sequence, in which you'll find an assessment folder which will outline the lesson plan that you're going to be working on. And then here you see that we're preparing this lesson plan sequence for geography on these systems, particularly with a focus on the environment in this case. And then the second half is working on the justification, and then the last part on appendices. So the first part is where you develop the 5 lessons, in which you look at the general capabilities and curriculum priorities in these lessons, and you can go to the various stages and aspects that can be included. You're going to look at general abilities like language, literacy and numeracy, and look at the graduate stages there as well. And then also look at diversity and how you will cope with each of these. Now, with the graduate stages, I encourage you to look up the graduate stage descriptors and start to work with these, because this will be important in the teaching that you do. So descriptors 1.1 through to 1.6 are about students and how they learn, how they gather knowledge. Descriptors 2.1 through to 2.6 are about how they develop an understanding of the content. And then 3.1 through to 3.6 is about the learning goals. 4.1 to 4.5 is about supportive and safe learning environments. So give thought to how you can make your classes interesting, encouraging, and supportive. 5.1 to 5.5 are the importance of providing feedback, even a third of the way into the lesson, halfway, three-quarters of the way, and at the conclusion of each lesson, and at conclusion of each week and each section of your course and the conclusion of the course. And then section 6.1 through to 6.4, be aware of the value of developing professionally and engaging with professional organisations. And 7.1 to 7.4, how you can engage with parents and the community. So you'll find all of these under the New South Wales Government Education standard descriptors, and I encourage you to become familiar with these, to quote these and to quote this page in your work so that you show familiarity with that. So I look forward to reading your assignments. I'm sure these are great assignments for this second assignment, and I look forward to interacting with you further. Any questions at all, please get in touch. This is a really valuable opportunity to understand the natural world in which we live from a number of perspectives. If you have a particular area of interest that you want to explore further, please get in touch, in that I'm happy to work with you on that as well. So I look forward to working with you in the future in these areas. Thank you.